I realized that I'm getting very close to finishing my ELO sketchbook, so I decided that I would finally get around to painting the cover for it. It's something that I knew I was going to do from the beginning. I didn't know initially if I was going to do something more complicated or something very, very simple, and I did have a couple of ideas for it along the way. My first idea was doing something very similar to another sketchbook cover I had done, which I thought would be kind of boring because it would be repetitive, but I really liked the initial design. And then I thought of just doing like a cat painting on the front. And the night before I actually ended up painting this, I had 100% decided I was just going to paint some very simple white flowers with gold accents on the cover and just leaving most of the space of the cover black, the original cover. And then out of the blue, I just got this idea to paint a forest, and I was very ambitious because this is completely out of my comfort zone. Out of all the mediums to work with something this complex in, at least it's complex for me. Acrylics are definitely my least favorite choice, so this was something that I was very unsure of right off the bat, and especially painting on a black surface and a sketchbook cover of all things because it feels very permanent. I was just kind of, I don't know, I was very ambitious with this one, and I'm glad I was because it actually ended up turning out really nice in my opinion. I'm very proud of it. It took me a long time to do, but I am really happy that this is the idea I ended up choosing. I did have a lot of issues working with this cover. It felt like every time I laid down paint, it would become less vibrant, just desaturated, and the color was just, it wasn't staying the way I wanted it to. I feel like the wet paint, when I was putting it down, was a lot more saturated, and once it dried, it just lost a lot of the vibrancy, so I ended up reworking the trees a lot. I didn't know the exact color scheme I wanted to go for. I definitely wanted to go something with like bluish greens in it, and that's not the direction that the finished product ended up with actually, so that just kind of ended up changing as I went along. It ended up very green and not the green blue that I initially envisioned it as. And also, just a heads up, I am using a mixture of Craftsmart and Apple Barrel acrylic paints, as well as 2 Liquitex heavy body paints. So for the most part, these are very, very thin paints, and I did have to lay down a lot of layers to get it to be opaque enough that you didn't really see the black background or it wasn't super streaky. So that was definitely something that took a lot of time as well, just because it was very time consuming. I ended up reworking areas, like I said, a lot. First and foremost, to actually lay down opaque color, and then I just kept changing the colors, especially for the trees, but it actually ended up working out fairly well. I didn't know how I was going to paint any of the foliage, just because that's something that I'm not super familiar with, but I just kind of left it being very messy and not worrying about it looking realistic necessarily, or like, I don't know, individual blades of grass kind of thing. The only thing I really focused on were the leaves in the foreground. Those were the only ones that I really put time and effort into, which I'm very happy I did because I like how those turned out. And then initially I was actually going to leave the cat being black. I wanted to keep some aspect of this painting to be the actual color of the sketchbook, but once I had started laying down the groundwork and laying down all the foliage and the bottom of the drawing, I realized that it was way, way too dark and the cat was getting lost in the background, so I decided to just cave in and paint it white because that way it would stand out a lot more, especially once I peeled off the washi tape from the sides. I figured that would look fairly nice just because it would stand out so much more than having a black cat down there, so I ended up painting over it, which I wasn't too happy about at the time because, like I said, I thought it would be nice to incorporate some design of the painting to be the original color of the sketchbook, but that is alright. And then working with the trees was also something that I was kind of saving until the very end. Any portion of the grass and the trees, I was just winging it. I didn't know what I was doing at all. I had some reference pictures that I had pulled up of other people's acrylic paintings of trees, but for the most part, I was just making it work, and surprisingly, it did not turn out bad in my opinion. Painting any kind of scenery is very intimidating. I'm not used to it, and it's something that I am working on, something I want to work on. I've mentioned that before, but it's just something I'm not familiar with, and it'll definitely take a lot of working with to make myself familiar with. I don't know if I'll ever get to the point where I'm super comfortable with it, but I figure this sketchbook cover was a good shot at that. It's also definitely something, color scheme alone, that is not in my comfort zone. It's a lot of neutral colors, darker colors. This painting ended up more dark than I intended it to, but I'm not displeased with it necessarily. It just ended up being a lot darker than I had anticipated, and definitely color scheme wise not what I had anticipated. But like I said, either way, I am really happy with it. The only thing that if I could go back and change of this painting, which technically I can still change, but I'm not going to, is I would change the background color of the sky to a yellow, just because it would make more sense with having the yellow highlights on the trees and the cat and the grass. I decided to do that at the very end, and I am really glad I did, because I felt like it really helped separate the trees from everything and just added some kind of lightness into it that it really needed for this painting. And that is pretty much it for the front of the cover. And since this is a bound sketchbook and it goes all the way around, I decided to do a little thing on the back. Initially, I was planning on painting all the way across from the front to the back of the sketchbook, but with my initial designs that worked, and with this one I really didn't feel like it. So what I ended up doing was painting technically two separate things on the sketchbook cover. I did one on the front and one on the back, and I also decided to keep the back very simple. I thought it would be very cute and just like more aesthetically pleasing design that way, so I ended up painting the cat over again. Initially I was just going to do the cat because I wasn't sure how I wanted to incorporate any kind of foliage with it, because I still wanted to keep it fairly small on the back of the cover, but it looked so plain, so I decided to just kind of wing it and incorporate leaves in there. I also did reference this pose of the cat from Haikala. I've mentioned her artwork before because I love her artwork, and she tends to incorporate cats just like randomly in with her artworks. Not necessarily randomly, I say it strategically, but she incorporates cats a lot within her artwork, and she draws cats a lot, so I was having issues with posing a cat, so I just referenced one of her drawings of a cat, so I stole the cat pose. But I do really like the back of the cover and how it turned out. Painting the leaves took me so long, but because I had done it on the front, I kind of knew what I was doing. It was just a lot of reworking to get the colors how I wanted, and I'm not like 100% happy with them, but considering my skill level with acrylic paints, I do really like how it ended up turning out. Honestly, the back of the cover is probably my favorite part of the cover, which sounds weird because like the front of the cover probably took me 3 hours and the back probably took me an hour. So as a whole, this was a very long project, but the back is my favorite part about it. I think it's just the simplicity of it and going alongside with the front. I just think it looks very cute. It's the same theme, the same colors, the same cat character, and I just really like how it fits on the back of the sketchbook and how it looks. I'm very happy with the back of it. The back is my favorite part of it pretty much. And that is pretty much it for the actual sketchbook cover. I did end up sealing it with Mod Podge just to keep it safe because I don't want anything to happen to it. And this is the Mod Podge I use. I use this to seal all of my sketchbook covers that I've done so far, which I do have a couple of other videos on my channel where I've painted sketchbook covers. This is the first one I've done with a bound sketchbook, so luckily I didn't have to go through the trouble of ripping out the covers from the spiral bound. My last sketchbooks have all been spiral bound. I think they've all been Canson sketchbooks, and since they have spirals, I have decided to go through and like pull out the backing and pull out the front, so that way I can paint around the spaces where the spirals would be so the entire cover was set. So that was nice that I didn't have to worry about that. It was very simple to just tape off a section and paint from there. And that is something I do appreciate about the ELO sketchbook too, is that their branding on their sketchbooks is not like super in your face and like ugly, because the Canson sketchbooks kind of have ugly sketchbook covers, so technically I didn't necessarily feel like this sketchbook needed something like that to go with it, but I just thought since I've been doing it for my last few sketchbooks, to me, it really helps personalize them. And I know I'm doing it at like the very end of my sketchbook, but the reason behind that is because I don't want it to get damaged. I know I seal them all the time, like every time I do a sketchbook cover painting I seal it, but I don't want them to get damaged in the process of me filling up the sketchbook, so normally I wait until I'm at least halfway done with it and then paint the cover, so that's just kind of how I do things. But like I said, I am really happy with how this one turned out. It's definitely not something that's in my comfort zone or in the realm of like color schemes of what I paint, but I'm really happy that I pushed myself to do something like this because it is something that I normally would not paint, so I am really happy with the outcome. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.